So many people are driven by a passion to make a difference, and they're thinking about maybe running for office, but what does that entail? You don't even know what you don't know. You don't know what questions to even ask to get the answers to be able to do something like this, to run for office. We wanted to get you a video of people who have been there before. We have 3 people on this Zoom who are going to be recording this conversation with us who have been there before. They've been candidates. They found success. These are the people you want to talk to. These are the ones who have the advice for you on what you're about to get yourself into and how to be prepared so you can win. We have with us Senator Terri Bryant, who actually started in the House back in 2014 and then moved over to the Senate. One of the hardest workers I know in politics. She's from Murfreesboro. Thank you, Senator Bryant, for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here and hope we can share some pearls of wisdom.
Excellent. I love it. We also have with us Representative Joe Sosnowski, who was first elected back in 2010. You were in the city council even before that in 2 different cities. So you've got a lot of electoral experience and a lot of success. You're also Paul Rudd because you apparently never age. Thank you, Joe, for joining us today.
It's all that vitamin D milk I drink. Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And we have someone who just went through this, so we'll be able to share very recent experience in Representative Jennifer Sanalitro. She was just elected in 2022. She's from Hanover Park. And one of the things that I don't know if I've mentioned to you, Representative, is we did the research back from this last election, and you were one of the top 5% of performers for Republicans across the whole state and one of the best in the entire Chicago suburbs. So thank you for being here to share your wisdom, Representative.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, let's jump right into it. Senator Bryant, I want to start with you. Let's start with the good. Why should people, if they're thinking about running for office, they're thinking about putting their name on the ballot as a Republican or maybe in a nonpartisan race as a conservative, why should they do it? Why should people run?
Well, the first time I ran for county board on an issue. And I did not win that county board seat. But the issue that I was trying to defeat was defeated. And so I would say people need to be passionate about what they want to do. Don't just run because you'd like to have a title by your name, but run because you really believe in what you're doing. And then, honestly, chances are if you work really hard, especially with some of the things we're going to share with folks today, you're likely going to win. But even if you don't, I felt like a winner at the end of it because the reason I got in was to kill a really bad safety tax. And I lost by 200 votes. Safety Act failed by 100 votes. If I had not gotten in the race, the Safety Act would have passed. So my advice is make sure that your reasons are sound. And if they're sound, jump in, but do it smartly.
I like it. Joe, you've been winning elections for 2 decades. I mean, what would you say to people if they're considering about running for office?
Yeah, I agree with the senator. You definitely want to run on a purpose, run on issues, and they have to be clear. I think sometimes, and you can sometimes see this on people's websites or their campaign material, if you're writing books and it's in small print and you have to spend an hour explaining what your point of view is spend an hour talking about why you want to run, you're not being clear, and so you've got to be able to, it's kind of a salesmanship type of position. One, you want to run on issues that you care about, you're passionate about, but you also have to tell people why you think you're the best to be able to accomplish something and give them a vision. Talk about the future. How can we do things better in the state of Illinois? And the list in Illinois is long for things that we can do better. But that's, you got to be true to yourself and you got to be clear and concise in your messaging and how you interact with people. And the final bit I would say is, that 30-second intro that people get, that first impression, that's huge in politics. If you're turning somebody off in that first 30, 60 seconds, you'll lose a vote. So you've got to be able to relate to people, talk to people, and interact with them in a positive manner.
Thank you for that. Jennifer, you just left not fully left, but you came from a very successful private sector career to move into politics. What would you say is a reason for people to make this move and why should they run?
Well, I still have that same career and I work in the small business sector. So one of the reasons I was passionate about it was because I felt like small businesses were being attacked across the board, across the nation and in our state. And I felt like, somebody's got to stick up for the people of the state. And I really just focused on that. I felt my experience, I could be an integral part of, telling people and helping people move forward. And I really just, that was my message. It was loud and clear. And every day that I went out, I just made sure that I pushed forward, and it was a lot of work, but, I really just focused on that, and it kind of grew from there. And I was successful in that only because I had a lot of help. I had a lot of help with my family, and I had a lot of help with Seth Lewis. So, it was a ton of work, but every day I would just say, if you want to do it, you have to be 100% committed. That's for sure. And it is a lot more work than you think it is, but it's also a lot of fun. I think I had a ton of fun doing it. And I think when people see that excitement, or that you're happy and you're excited to do it, people want to do that with you. So I definitely had the energy to do it, and I was prepared for anything. And I almost have like a hustle about me, where I love a competition, and I think that's what motivated me. So I don't know if that really.
No, that was a great answer. What's one thing you wish you had known? I know you just ran and you just won. What was something you wish you had known before you even got into it? I know you mentioned Seth Lewis and others, I'm sure, mentored you and supported you, but what's something that now you go, man, if I had known blank at the very beginning, it would have really helped?
Well, Seth said it was pretty easy, and I'm just kidding. He didn't. And I think I wish I would have known how much support you're going to need from your family. Because people would ask me, they'd say, "Oh, do you have the support from your family?" I'm like, "Well, what is it? I mean, of course, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do." No, you definitely have to have support from your husband or your spouse or your significant other, and your children. Because if they're not happy, I mean, how can you run a successful campaign if you're not, if your family's not supporting you? So I wish I would have known how much support they're gonna have to give, because they definitely had to be involved, especially at the start. The start, you're gonna need help. You need help getting things together, getting organized, and you can't go out and knock doors all by yourself, or go put out signs all by yourself. You need support. So your ground game starts with your family, I believe.
That's great.
So,
Terri, what about you? Is there something you wish you would know?
Well, yeah. I could like to echo what Jen said, but also this idea of your family supporting you. I after church on a Sunday, because I had the whole family, son, daughter, son-in-law, grandkids, husband, everybody right there. And I said, come on, we got to go talk for a minute. We went into a classroom, and I told them what I was going to do. And I said, I cannot do this if you all are not behind me, because I had done several campaign schools. So I knew the nuts and bolts. I don't think you really fully understand until you're fully immersed, but I had the nuts and bolts. The one thing I knew from running for county board, because I actually lost 4 times running for county board before I ran for the state house. And all 4 times, my husband didn't really want me to run for county board. So he supported me after I made the choice, but he didn't want me to. And when I mentioned this to the family, everybody was all in. And the reason it is so important isn't just the amount of time that you spend away, but like Jen, and I think also Joe, I was in a tier 1 race against an individual who had never lost a race. I think he was the sheriff for like 27 years, fully funded by Mike Madigan. And they spent 2 to 1 what I was able to spend. And so tier 1 being that I was a number 1 race for the Republicans, and I was tier 1 for the Democrats to beat. So it got super ugly. 24 hours a day. Media in this region is very cheap. So that means that they were running them on every network, every cable station, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was always about how horrible I am. And so in that case, your family has to be all in because they're getting attacked as well. It might not be them personally, but my son, both of my kids love me, but a son wants to take care of mama. And honestly, if they're not all in, soon down the road, everybody wants out.
That's a fair point. That's a good thought. Joe, do you have thoughts on this as well as something you wish you had known?
Well, I echo what both my colleagues said. Definitely families got to be involved, and they really are your number one campaign support mechanism getting started. Especially your first time running for something or your first time running for a big office. I had my mom and dad were out, helping some days. My sister who lived in a different state was helping with call lists. So they were instrumental in helping out. And then that, you grow from that. Obviously, you bring in other volunteers to help out. So absolutely key to have that support. I don't know if there's really, I've had that question before, and until you really experience a campaign, I think, you just don't know what to expect. You can have somebody else tell you about it, but until you're actually there figuring out how to get signs out and answer emails and knock on doors and get volunteers organized at the local McDonald's so that they're out knocking on doors for you too, until you're kind of in the midst of all of that, it's tough to really explain that to somebody, but it's a lot of fun.
I've got a good follow-up question for you that I think will be right up your alley. I mean, you've run and seen a lot of successful candidates in campaigns. What's something when you're looking for a candidate in a certain district? What's something that you look for that makes that person a good candidate? Like, what's a thing you might look for that says, yeah, okay, this is a candidate that's a tier one or has a good chance of winning?
Yeah, well, hard work. Hard work and a good personality. And that will overcome any number of flaws. If somebody is willing to put in the time, more often than not, I've seen that person win their election. I mean, if they're really going above and beyond, and when they say they're knocking on hundreds of doors a day, and they themselves are knocking on 100 doors, that person's going to win because they're putting in the time and the effort. You can just put your name on some flyers, hope for the best, but that's not going to win elections in a lot of cases. And so, that hard work. And then the second part, the personality, again, I mentioned in the intro, that 30-second elevator speech, being able to connect to somebody and say, hey, here's my 3 main issues. This is what I want to see. This is the future of this community or of Illinois. And being able to share that in a quick way and motivate people, that's the key. But number one, above anything else, is putting in the time. As one of my colleagues mentioned, you've got to be dedicated to put the time in to win the race. Otherwise, why do it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Jennifer, what about you? Is there something that when you see something in someone, you go, man, they'd be a great candidate?
Yeah, I have a sister-in-law that I keep saying, you would be so good at this. You should run. I tell her that all the time. The reason, because everywhere she goes, she gets people involved. Like we call her the mayor. We call her the mayor all the time because she always has a ton of people around her. She can get a party together in a minute, and she has a ton of energy and she's very spirited. And so I'm always like, you should run. I'm always telling her she should run. But I agree with Joe that if you're not going to put the time in, and you're not going to knock doors, you might not have as good of a chance. Like, I was knocking 300 to 600 doors a week, at most at first, right? And then at the last few months, it was every single day, full days knocking doors. And I think that's what was successful. While other candidates, they would say they would go out on a Saturday from 12 to 4 every other week or something, and I was like, that's no doors. You're not talking to anybody. So I think that was one thing that really helped me.
Terri, what about you?
Well, there's no comparison to shoe leather, right? So that's old fashioned. As they're saying, knock on doors. You have to do that, and you can't depend on others to do it. But I would say when I'm looking for a candidate that maybe I want to recruit, because I'm leadership now in the Senate, so I'm constantly looking for who that might be. I watch how people work a room. How do people respond to them? Does the person, are they a wallflower when they go to another Republican event? Or are they the person that's up shaking hands? I would tell you, I'm going to name drop here for a minute, because one of the reps that is in my Senate district is Representative Dave Severin. One of the things that stood out to me the most about Dave was his servant's heart. So when I watch Dave, he actually gets up from his seat and starts clearing away all of the plates, paper plates, glass plates, whatever. When you see something like that in someone, you know that they have a servant's heart, but they're also outgoing. They're not afraid to talk to someone. And I'd say lastly, the last thing, there's other things too, but the important things are when an individual is in a conversation where it's going to be controversial, or they're not going to agree with the person, how do they handle that? Are they confrontational? Because they might not be a good candidate if they don't know how to handle the issue in an assertive way without offending half the people that are in the room. So I think those are important things to look at.
Terri, I wanted to follow up a question directly to you, and then we'll get to the other two with this question as well. But something that people may not know about you is you've been instrumental in an organization called why am I blanking?
Illinois Lincoln Series.
The Lincoln Series.
Illinois
I knew
Lincoln
Lincoln was
Series.
in there. I was going to call it the wrong thing, and I didn't want to screw it up. The Lincoln Series, which has recruited dozens, if not hundreds, of women into politics and Republican office and conservative offices. It's really a huge thing. And so you've seen a lot of candidates, you've seen a lot of campaigns, and I don't want to ask you to name names, but what's something you see in candidates other than not working hard? Because I feel like we've definitely covered that. What's something you've seen in candidates that maybe has limited their success? Like, we just said what they should do. What shouldn't they do? What's a thing that you've seen maybe hold some candidates back, other than obviously not working hard?
Well, fundraising is a big issue. Candidates will have, lots of people say, oh, if you run, I'll support you. But then when it comes time to write a check, sometimes it's difficult to get somebody else to write the check, and new candidates don't ask. So firstly, one of the things we teach women in the Lincoln Series is women, for some reason, tend to raise only about half as much money as men do. And they have to work twice as hard even to get that. And so it becomes very important that we have a 100-question questionnaire. When I was the president, that we would have people kind of sit down and fill out for themselves, not hand in, but just fill out for themselves. One of those things is, who do you know? 10 people that can give you $1,000. Name 50 people who can give you $10. Name 25 people who can give you $100. And we ask them to make up that kind of a list. Because the fact is, if you are going to self-finance, if you're a J.B. Pritzker or a Bruce Rauner, maybe you have enough to do that. But the likelihood in the state house that you could self-finance is slim to none. And besides that, even if you can self-finance, every person that writes you a check is going to vote for you if they live in your district. So those $10 donations, those $5 pass the hats, those are the people that will vote for you. So I think it's super important for candidates to know that you have to ask people for money. And we always told them, ask for more than they can give you. So for instance, if I know you could write me $100 check, I might ask you for 200, and then you're going to say, no, I can't give you 200, but you know what? I can give you 100. And in theory, the person feels complimented that you thought they could give that much. And then secondly, you got more from them than you would have gotten had you not asked at all. So asking is super important.
Yeah, you know what? Let's stay on that topic, and I'll come back to it if you guys have thoughts different, Joe and Jennifer. But I'd love to get your thoughts just on fundraising. I mean, it's the hardest thing to do in politics. It's the thing that many candidates dread doing. But if you're going to win, it's absolutely necessary. Joe, what are your thoughts on fundraising advice for these candidates, and how do they get themselves motivated to do this?
Yeah, and I've, my professional career, I do fundraising, and I've done that for a decade for a pre-K through 12 school, and then more recently, last couple of years, been working for a senior living community doing the fundraising world. And so I do that in both the private sector and the public sector. And Terry's right. It's just a lot of it's just asking. Sometimes people aren't picking up the phone. You're not maybe sending a letter to them or sending an email to them. Sometimes it only takes a text message. And so just putting in that time and asking and putting yourself in front of them is key. And so you've got to be able to be willing to do that. And, it's not always exorbitant amounts of money. You've got to set a budget ahead of time. If you're not self-funding, like JB or Bruce Rauner, as Terri mentioned, you got to set a budget, figure out what you want to spend. And you don't need to spend, in some races, massive amounts of money. If you can get your message out, you're doing the right things with shoe leather and volunteers and in other ways. And so you've got to kind of plan that ahead and see what you need to raise. But a great way to raise that money is show people, that budget, number one, what you're going to do with it, what your message is, and tie all of those things together, because people want to support a winner. They want to support a winning message, and they want to support winning issues. And that's how you get people motivated and excited to support you as a candidate.
Yeah. And as you intimated there, I mean, we're not begging for money. You're giving them an opportunity to invest in what they already care about, right? So it's a different perspective on fundraising. Jennifer, before I flip it back to the previous question, any thoughts on fundraising on your end, on tips for success for first-time candidates?
I think as a first-time candidate, I thought, how am I going to raise money? I hated asking people for money. I hate it. I'm a giver, not a taker. So I thought, this is going to be terrible. How am I going to do it? I think I didn't realize if you show up to events and you go to other people's events and you work the room, like she said, and you give out cards and you make connections, that those people in turn will come to your events, and so will some of the people that you met. So it's important to network, and it's important to just put yourself out there, and you have to show up. If you don't show up and go to things and meet people, you're probably not going to get that many people at your event or that want to give you money.
Yeah, let me flip it back, and we'll stay with you, Jennifer, on the previous question of what's something that you've seen now, other than lack of hard work and fundraising? Is there something else that maybe you've seen in candidates that's maybe held them back in different races or different areas? Have you seen anything like that we can maybe help new candidates avoid those pitfalls?
I think I saw a couple people that I loved and wanted to win. I think a couple of the reasons they didn't win was because I think they thought digital only, or just by sending out emails and going to a couple of the township meetings or and so on was going to help them win. And all I kept saying was doors, doors, doors. And I think they didn't get it. So
well, in the social media era, I mean, people are desperate for personal interaction. So when you build that personal relationship, doesn't matter how much the Democratic campaign arm spends against you. When voters know you personally, it isn't going to work. So I think you're absolutely right on that. Joe, thoughts on your end on something that maybe first-time candidates should avoid, pitfalls they should be aware of?
Yeah, two things. Just to piggyback on Jennifer's comment, emails, social media, and text messages. If you rely on those alone, you're not going to win. People want to meet you, and it's not only just doors, but meeting somebody and talking to them wherever it's at, they will engage and they will talk to their friends. So it's all about building that network. And I can't tell you how many people, when I ran for the alderman in Rockford, which is now 14 years ago, they're still coming. Number one, some still think I'm their alderman, so they're calling on light bulbs that are out and things like that. But I'll still run into people, and you stopped in my neighborhood, in my street. And it's like, if they're reminding me 14 years later, they've certainly mentioned that to some other people. And so that word of mouth is hugely helpful. But the other thing I would say is, not listening to other people. When I see some local candidates maybe who I'm like, yeah, they're going to struggle, it's because they're just not listening to the basics. They're maybe spending a bunch of money in social media, or they're thinking they're just going to send out a bunch of mail and that's going to win it for them. But if they're not, taking advice from people that have done it, and asking several people, don't just rely on one person. Ask a lot of peers and a handful of other people, and get some of the best practices, and then take the ideas and run with them. But that willingness to listen to others, rely on their support and their advice is going to be helpful in anybody's campaign.
Let me ask you a follow-up and we'll go around with this question. We're only a few more minutes and then we'll close down. The campaign is stressful. How do you deal with that stress? I mean, I always say it's the best thing you'll ever do and the worst thing you'll ever do all at the same time. I mean, it's a difficult process. How do you put up with that stress? And Joe, if you don't mind kicking us off on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of, I think you got to compartmentalize, right? If you're, whether it's work, professional, personal issue, whatever's going on, you've got to be able to kind of separate things out. So if you're on the campaign and you're working in that mode, you got to have a time where you can shut that off, focus on family. It's easier said than done for some people. I've been able to kind of figure that out and make sure that I'm setting aside the right amount of time for, both personal responsibilities, family responsibilities, and others. But sometimes it's easy to get swooped up and, man, I got a list of, 100 miles long. And so you've just got to be careful about that and just, make sure you're, focusing on what's important. You could do a lot of little things, but, those sometimes are the things, try to rely on volunteers to help with some of that. So that can relieve you as a candidate to be able to focus on, the higher level stuff, but also be able to kind of, not spend, 180 hours a week, campaigning. You gotta have a little bit of time to unwind.
Yeah, balance is important. Terri, you're a warrior, and I think anyone who looks at you says, she doesn't feel stress. I think people just knowing, like running for office, that even you feel stress. Like, how do you deal with that? Because you're human. I'm sure you deal with it every once in a while. Like, what do you do to deal with that stress?
Well, first of all, I'm retired from the Department of Corrections. So there's a lot of techniques that you kind of learn when you're in that kind of an environment. But if you can see in the background, it looks like I am at home right now. I came home about a half an hour before we got on this. I've already been to an Ameren event this morning. I did a 20-minute interview an hour away from here. My district's 4,700 square miles. But if I were able to turn the camera right now, I would show you the outside of my house. My house is super humble. It's a improved upon mobile home, right? So it's a pretty humble place. But outside, I have a 1-acre pond. It's got a fountain in the middle, kayaks, paddle boats, canoe, rope to swing off on. It's stocked with fish. I love to fish. I'm in Southern Illinois. So when I have the opportunity this evening, I have 2 sets of twin grandsons and then 2 other grandkids. So I try to immerse myself in the grandkids and in people who are positive around me. In the middle of a campaign, I told my husband his job is to make sure that I never see a negative commercial. So he is the clicker. The only time in our lives he's allowed the clicker. And he makes sure that I don't see anything negative. So, when you're on the campaign trail, you got to do what Joe said. You have to carve out, even if it's a super busy day, carve out an hour or two to sit. I'm a woman of faith. So I also try to carve out a few minutes for devotion. If you did an hour of devotional time and prayer earlier and you're in the middle of a campaign, maybe you just do 20 minutes now or 15 minutes. So you have to adjust your schedule to fit what you're doing right now. And remember that this chaos period of time that you're in during a campaign is a brief time of life. It's not the whole rest of your future. And so keep those things in perspective and carve out that little bit of time to fish or walk your dog or listen to music, whatever it happens to be.
I like it. Jennifer, Democrats spent massive amounts of money going after you in this last election. How'd you deal with that stress? What would you recommend to potential candidates on how to manage the stress?
I think, well, I'm a little bit different because the more they attacked me, I think it motivated me. So it gave me like a push. I felt kind of excited, like, oh, okay, it's on. So I felt more competitive about it. I think again, I think it's just self-care, time management, and you have to manage both. And taking care of yourself is the number one most important thing. And I thought at times, if I'm getting too stressed, a couple times I was like, I just have to shut it down today. I'm not going tonight, because I knew that if I didn't take care of myself and I was completely exhausted, what good am I? I'm going to show up. I'm going to be somebody that I'm not. And then I'm going to turn off a bunch of people that wanted to support me and they're not going to like me. So you have to know when to shut it down. You have to know when it's time to take care of yourself, because, nobody's going to take care of you except for yourself. So, just time management and just keeping that focus keeps a lot of the stress off.
That's great. All right, last question from me, and then we'll give you guys a chance for closing thoughts and then get you on your way. You're all very busy. But Jennifer, I want to start with you since you've just recently gone through this, and then ask the other two. One of the questions that we do get from people or regret is that they didn't get their personal lives in order before running, whether it's their finances or family matters or whatever it might be. You guys know, once you're in the campaign, once you're in the heat of politics, so much of the others, you struggle to find time for it. And so now we're recording this in the summer, 3 months before petitions start getting passed. Now would be the time to get those things in place. What advice would you have for candidates who are right now thinking about maybe running in a few months? What should they do now to get things in order so that they're ready when the time comes, whether it's on the personal finances, family, professional? What might you have thoughts on? Jennifer, we'll start with you.
I would make sure that you can actually put the time in, see if you're going to be able to gain enough support to help you get started. And most importantly, make sure you're mentally ready and you're mentally prepared to, get out there and work and make sure it happens.
Joe, any thoughts on this topic? Yeah, I don't think I would differ too much from that. You just gotta be ready. And don't make the decision to do it if you're not. So, make sure that that's all taken care of and you're ready to go. You've got the support from family and beyond, like we mentioned earlier. And you gotta have made that decision and run through that analysis very early on. And if you're not deciding right now, you mentioned 3 months away. I'm like, oh man, it is almost 3 months away. But yeah, if you haven't decided that you're kind of getting ready at this point, or in the next 30 days, you're getting ready to kind of start planning, then maybe you need to hold off. But I think in any cycle, you've got to be ready before petitions in order to kind of start, and then it actually helps you. I think it relieves your stress if you've started early and you've done the pre-planning and you've gotten an organization, you got your family behind you, and then you launch into petition mode. Then you've got that momentum. So I think it's important to decide early and be ready early. Yeah, and that'd be a really stable foundation. That'd be great. Terri, what about thoughts on your end?
Well, I had some great advice from a Senate friend before I started, who said, even before you start petitions, you should be out there. So coffee shops, things like that, and be saying to people, hey, here's who I am. I'm going to be announcing soon. I haven't made the announcement yet. I'm going to be announcing soon. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I think we got sidetracked a little bit, and that is, if you're meeting people early and you're having those conversations, when your opponent comes out and says something negative about you, those people are going to say, absolutely not. I met that person. I already saw them at the coffee shop. And I'm going to give super quickly a couple ideas if you're doing that before you've announced or before the petitions start. You're right to say get all of those things at home in order. But I did things like I bought several dozen coffee cups. And I go to a coffee shop. This was before I got elected, before I started passing petitions. And I bought coffee for everybody in the coffee shop with my coffee cup. And so, in small towns, there's a mishmash of coffee cups, and the diners are thrilled to have you leave some for them. But you're sitting there drinking coffee with people who don't know you yet. And then when it comes time to sign petitions and you show up at that coffee shop again, they remembered the last time you were in there, you bought them coffee. Yeah, I'll sign your petitions. That's a little thing, not a big deal. But the advice that I got from my friend who's a senator was be in the field before you're in the field, right? So when those folks start saying negative things about you, it's not going to stick. Now, it's harder if you're in a more urban area than if you're in a more rural area. But I would also maintain if you're in a rural area, you can't necessarily walk from house to house. I have to drive from house to house in a whole lot of areas. So get out there early, make your name well known, be sure people know that you are not the boogeyman, because the Democrats will make you out to be the boogeyman. And that is just not the case. People need to know that before it happens.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to try to create a caricature of you, and the left has created a caricature of what a Republican means and looks like, and we're all living with that caricature. So when they get to know you personally, they realize you're not this crazy thing that's been sold to them by the left and by the media. So that personal relationship is huge. All right, I want to respect your time, so we'll do closing thoughts. Thank you guys so much for joining. Terri, if you want to start us off, and then Joe, and then Jennifer, just any closing thoughts you have on final advice for candidates as they're starting to think about running?
Yeah, I would especially say to the women who might be listening to this, that often women wait until they're asked to run for office. Do not wait. It's one of the main things we teach in the Lincoln series, and that is, if you don't have to run for park board, for forest preserve board, for library board. If that's what you want to do, fine. But if you want to run for higher office, you have the ability to do that. Jump in and do it. Don't wait to be asked. Go and tell your state representative, your state senator, this is what I said to Mike Bost and Dave Lechtefeld. I'm not nipping at your heels. You can't be beaten. Don't worry about me. But if you leave office, I want your seat. Right? So that was 6 years before I ran. So if you think you want to do it, get ready. Take however long it takes to get ready, but jump in. Don't wait to be asked.
I love that.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to add one last thing, if I could. Yeah, one last thing. I do not believe in running in primaries against incumbents who are doing their job. So if you have an incumbent in that seat, don't run just because you want to get elected to something. If they're doing their job, let them do their job. If they're not doing their job, go challenge them.
Yeah, I agree with don't wait. Don't wait for somebody to ask you, jump in, and don't let people tell you, hey, you got to wait your turn either. I heard that a lot. My first race as alderman in the city of DeKalb, after I graduated from being a student there, and I decided, the following, that April I'm going to run. But I heard from plenty of people, oh, you're too young, not ready, you can't do it, you got to wait your turn, that type of thing. And if you do that, you may never run. So if you feel that you've got a message, you feel that you do a good job, you feel that there's something lacking out there, and you're a contributor, go out and do it.
We just need good people to run, and so that this state can have success for the next generation, so that we can live, work, raise a family here. And we just need you to do it. So if you're thinking about it, get it done.
I like it. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for doing this. I know all three of you have a heart for investing in the next generation and supporting that next generation of leaders. So I'd say anyone who's watching this, if you have questions, I know Terri, Joe, Jennifer, their information is public. You can just Google them. You can get connected to them. I know they'd be happy to provide additional support for you, or guidance or counsel. That's just the type of people they are. They're servant leaders. That's why I love that I get to know you three, and thank you guys for doing this. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I'll close with this, guys. If you're thinking about running, listen to the advice you've been given by three people who know what they're talking about. Consider this diligently, because you owe it to your principles to win. You owe it to your party to win. And if you're going to get in and then get out, you kill us, because then we have no other options. But we want you in. So prepare yourself. Get ready, but then we need good people to run for office. So please take a serious consideration to taking that step. If we're ever going to turn around the state of Illinois, it's going to come with good people running for office. So please seriously consider this. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you again to you three, and we'll be talking again soon. Thanks all.